Good morning. Thank you so much for your well wishes last week. Much appreciated. I'm on the mend, slowly. Anyway, I'm sure that you've heard Watchtower's reversal on the education policy. It illustrates the disastrous results of not understanding the scriptures properly and then forcing other people to follow your opinions. Now, I don't want to go into it because others have done so, but Jesus faced a similar situation in the first century. John chapter 8. Now, he had been telling the scribes and Pharisees that he was the Christ. So he said to them in verse 12, I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will not walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. I mean, what a wonderful thing to be presented with, and yet they rejected it badly. They said, you are bearing witness about yourself, your testimony is not true. They wanted two witnesses. That might remind you of somebody. Now, it illustrates that they did not understand the law of Moses properly. They didn't understand this true witness rule. However, what they were really trying to do was discredit Jesus. So he explains to them the two witness rule. Verse 18, I am the one who bears witness about myself. So that's one witness. And then he says that my Father also, who sent me, he bears witness about me. That was the second witness. Now, Jesus was explaining to them that evidence is testimony, is a witness. The works that Jesus had done couldn't possibly have been done unless he was the Son of God. Now, the discussion that he had with the scribes and Pharisees turned nasty and became dangerous. So Jesus got out of the way and he was in a different area with his disciples. And he came across a man who had been born blind. And Jesus was going to use this to give the scribes and Pharisees evidence he was the Son of God. Now, the disciples, unfortunately, had been influenced by the scribes and Pharisees to the extent that they said to Jesus, who sinned? Was it this man's parents or himself that he was born blind? The scribes and Pharisees did not understand inherited sin from Adam, which causes all of us to become sick at some point or other. So Jesus said it was not this man who sinned or his parents, but that the works of God, this evidence that he was the Son of God, might be displayed in this man. Now, Jesus did an unusual thing here. Instead of staying around to see the effects of his cure, he made a paste from the mud and he spat on it and put it on the eyes of the blind man. And he said to this man, right, go to the pool of Siloam, wash, and you will be able to see. Now, the blind man knew his way. He knew how to get to the pool of Siloam, so off he went on his own. And he washed, and lo and behold, he could see. So he went back to where he was. Now, Jesus wasn't there at that time, but his friends and neighbours were. So they said to him, what's happened to you? And he explained he'd been cured. They take him, in their wisdom, to the scribes and Pharisees, who, of course, were the religious leaders of the day and should have been able to pronounce some sort of nice comments on this. But once the blind man had explained to them how he had been healed, the scribes and Pharisees said, this man must be a sinner. He cannot be from God. Why? Because he did it on the Sabbath. So here we have three things that the scribes and Pharisees did not understand. They did not understand the two witness rule. They did not understand inherited sin from Adam. And now they are demonstrating they do not understand the Sabbath law. They were blind guides, not understanding the scriptures. So, what happened? Well, the Jews did not believe, the scribes and Pharisees did not believe that this man had been born blind, so they called his parents. Now, please do not be like these parents. They answered truthfully and said, yes, this is our son, and he was born blind. But then they said, but we don't know how it is that he now sees. Now, that wasn't true. They did know. But the problem was, as it says in verse 22, his parents said these things because they feared the Jews. For the Jews had already agreed that if anyone should confess Jesus to be the Christ, he was to be put out of the synagogue. So if the parents had confessed that Jesus was the Christ and had cured their son, they would have suffered economic loss, having been thrown out of the synagogue. They had no gratitude that their son had been healed, and they didn't have the faith that they would be looked after if they confessed Jesus was the Christ. So we won't follow them. However, we will follow the example of the blind man, who's now, of course, seeing. Because the scribes and Pharisees get hold of him again, and they want to discredit Jesus' miracle. So they said, right, how did it happen? And he says, well, I've already told you. Do you want to be his disciples? Which, of course, they didn't. So they reviled him, and they said, look, we know Moses. We know where Moses came from. We're disciples of Moses. We don't know where this man came from. So the blind man said to them, well, of course, he's not blind anymore. He said, this is an amazing thing. You don't know where he comes from, and yet he opened my eyes. God does not listen to sinners, but if anyone is a worshipper of God and does his will, God listens to him. Never since the world began has it been heard that anyone opened the eyes of a man born blind. If this man were not from God, he wouldn't be able to do anything. So the scribes and Pharisees said, you have been born in sin. So they go back to their previous ideas. And are you going to teach us? And they throw him out. Which is the sort of thing that people do today if you can't agree with them. So Jesus now appears on the scene again, and he says to this blind man that's now seeing, do you believe in the Son of Man? Now remember that this is the first time that the blind man has seen Jesus, so he doesn't know who he is. But he said, well, you know, if you would tell me who he is, I will believe. And Jesus said, I am the one. And the man said, I do believe. And he bent his knee to Jesus. Now Jesus said, and for everybody that was watching, for judgment I came into this world, that those who do not see may see, and those who see may become blind. What he meant was that the scribes and Pharisees claimed they could see. They claimed they could understand the law of Moses and they were going to teach it to you. But they were blind, and they were blind guides. And whoever followed them would be going down a dark alley. So we need to just follow Jesus Christ. Examine what we're being taught. Make sure it's from Jesus Christ and not from anybody else. Not from man-made wisdom, not from Watchtower's governing body. We'll stick to Jesus Christ. And if we do that, we will have God's blessing and we will see, we will understand. Thank you so much for watching, and God bless you all.